Here you go, ladies. This is the last podcast of the year, and today we're talking about Barack Obama's presidency. Barack Obama is the 44th president, and of course you can see him pictured here. I think that you all recognize Barack Obama. Obama was elected first in the 2008 election. He had been at the time a senator representing Illinois. His running mate was Joe Biden, and Joe Biden is the current vice president. In the first election in 2008, they defeated John McCain and his running mate Sarah Palin. In 2012, they defeated Mitt Romney and his running mate Paul Ryan. And the picture here that you see is a very famous campaign poster from the 2008 election. There were a series of these made all by the same artist, and they have hope and change, and these were kind of the themes of Obama's election. And the election in 2008 very much tried to inspire and appeal to young people, and we saw in 2008 a very big voter turnout amongst young people. Voter turnout in this country has been a big problem. A lot of people are not voting, and it's a little disconcerting, and so there are efforts that both parties make to reach out to people and to get them to vote, but the young people tend to align themselves with the Democratic Party more so, and Barack Obama and, future candidates will definitely grasp hold and try to of that youth vote, which is so important and which has been traditionally very underrepresented in the elections. So the first big domestic issue that Obama is going to have to contend with is the Great Recession, which begins in 2008 while Bush is still president. The unemployment rate peaked at 10% in October 2009. We have since seen a decrease in that rate, but it's been very, very slow. So we have about a 5.5% rate as of May of 2015, which is pretty much average. If you look at the next bullet point here, you'll see from 1948 until 2010, the average was about 5.7%. So we are a little below that actually. So we've definitely seen a great decrease in the unemployment rate since the height of the recession in 2009. It didn't even reach as high as the historic high of 10.8% in November of 1982. Now the record low was 2.5% in 1953, and that was a period of time of great prosperity in American history in the 50s. Obviously it was higher during the Great Depression itself, but we're talking about anything since World War II as far as those statistics that you're seeing here. So again, this is something that happened under Bush's administration, but it was definitely something that Obama was going to have to contend with in his administration. So just like during the Great Depression, we saw weaknesses in several industries leading up to the Great Recession, particularly the banking industry, the auto industry, the insurance industry, and real estate, essentially. So failures in those in banking, the nearly bankrupt auto industry, all of these things threaten to worsen an already bad economic situation. So under Bush, Congress passed an act and Bush signed it, and it continued under Obama, known as the Troubled Asset Relief Program, or TARP for short. There's a possibility that you could encounter a question about this on the exam. So essentially, this is government money that was given to bail out hundreds of banks, some insurance companies. The biggest that you may have heard of that is talked about is AIG, as well as automakers. So it was essentially money given to those companies to keep them afloat, because it was believed that if those companies failed, that it could have ripple effects throughout the economy and make the recession even worse. So there was $700 billion in bailout money that was given to these companies. Many of the companies have repaid the government, particularly those in the auto industry, but a lot of people argue with the program and they believe it's corporate welfare. So instead of giving handouts to people, we're giving handouts to corporations. And it has definitely come under fire for the fact that it has been found out that even after this money was given, some of these companies have been paying really high salaries and bonuses to their executives, and many people find that very unfair, that that's the case, that these businesses essentially that had all these weaknesses that helped to lead to this recession have executives that are getting these huge bonuses and salaries. And so that has inspired some anger amongst the American people. This cartoon really illustrates that fact. So you can see this emaciated cow hair, and I know it's a little bit blurry, but around its neck you see a bell that says U.S. economy. And then you see Barack Obama with all these buckets for AIG, autos, banks, housing. These represent all the different industries that got bailout money. And he's trying to milk this cow, but there's nothing left, essentially. And so it's kind of showing this idea that the federal government really doesn't have a lot of money to bail out these industries, yet we continue to do it anyway. So one important other domestic issue during Obama's presidency is the British Petroleum oil spill. BP, or British Petroleum, is a British-owned oil company, so it provides crude oil to be refined into gasoline. The oil spill that occurred in 2010 was the worst oil spill in the country's history, worse even than the Exxon Valdez, which was the name of a ship that was carrying oil off the coast of Alaska in 1989. And that ship ran aground because the captain on board, apparently he was drunk. So anyway, it ripped a hole in the part of the ship that was carrying the oil, and it spewed millions of gallons of oil into the coast off of Alaska there, and destroying a lot of wildlife and becoming a massive cleanup effort. Well, the British Petroleum incident was even worse. Now, this happened in April 2010. A drilling rig in the ocean exploded. It was about 40 miles off the coast of Louisiana. 11 workers died, 17 were injured. It was a very devastating explosion, and nearly a mile beneath the surface of the ocean, where the drill hit the ocean bed where they were getting the oil from, oil began spewing into the water, and they could not figure out how to end the to cap that so that the oil would not continue spilling, and it took about 87 days for that to happen. So millions of gallons ended up in the ocean as a result. The cleanup efforts and the compensation for the Gulf Coast residents affected still continue. It's funded mostly by British Petroleum, but a lot of people were left unemployed as a result. The biggest hard-hit industries were the recreation industry, so a lot of the beaches along the coast had oil flowing up on shore, and nobody wanted to go to those beaches. A lot of people who were involved in the fishing industry were the most greatly affected, particularly the shrimping industry. It greatly devastated their economy, and so it was a big economic hardship for many people, as well as a huge environmentally devastating event as well. So I'm sure you've all heard about Obamacare, which is officially known as the Affordable Care Act, and it was passed in 2010. It was something that Obama had greatly pushed for and advocated and proposed to Congress. So it means all Americans will have access to affordable health care, and Obama originally said it was mandated that all would have health care coverage. Now, since he's kind of changed his tune because the Supreme Court basically called the mandate, instead of a mandate, a tax, and said that they have the authority to impose that type of tax. In any event, it does do some good things, which is forbidding insurance companies to deny coverage for pre-existing conditions. So there were a lot of people who couldn't get coverage because they had health issues, and the insurance companies didn't want to cover them because that would be costly for them. That's not allowed any longer. Also, young people can stay on their parents' insurance longer. So if you're in college and you come home and you can't find a job quite yet, maybe you have to live at home, or it takes a while to get on your feet because you can't find that dream job because it is a tough economy right now, you can remain on your parents' insurance until you're 26, I believe. It has definitely been criticized for the cost as well as taking away personal choice. If people don't want insurance, it's believed they shouldn't have to have that. Now, this came before the Supreme Court in the National Federation of Independent Business versus Sebelius. It was named for Kathleen Sebelius, who at the time was the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services. The Supreme Court did uphold the constitutionality of the act, defining it as a tax and not a mandate or essentially an order to the American people. So, of course, we know that constitutionally the federal government has the authority to impose a tax, and this is considered as a tax. There is a current Supreme Court case dealing with this issue that is pending right now, so we'll see if that strikes down any parts of the Affordable Care Act. Now, Republicans in Congress have worked to try to repeal the Affordable Care Act, and you can see that demonstrated in this cartoon. So here is Obama, the flag for Obamacare. Uncle Sam saying, so how many times does that make? He says 37 because the elephant representing the GOP, meaning the Grand Old Party, the Republicans, is trying to vote to repeal the Affordable Care Act. And at this point, it was 37 times, and this is in 2013. I think it's been more like 60 as of 2015. So, they're definitely trying to repeal the act. The Supreme Court has been reviewing the act, usually needs the ability of judicial review, and so, the act is not necessarily written in stone because of these issues. So we just have to kind of wait and see what will happen with this Affordable Care Act. So in the election 2 years after Obama was elected, in the 2010 midterm elections, Republicans took majority of the House of Representatives, and John Boehner was elected Speaker of the House. So he took that position away from Nancy Pelosi, the first female Speaker of the House. A big group to emerge was the Tea Party, and T stands for Taxed Enough Already, and they became very influential in the most recent elections. They're a third party, meaning they're a minor party. They have one particular issue that they stand for. They want reduced taxes. They want smaller government. They are definitely have broad appeal to many of the Republicans, particularly the more conservative Republicans in the party, and so many of them are influenced by this Tea Party group. At the same time, both Democrats and Republicans have shown a great inability or unwillingness to compromise on a lot of important issues, and so you definitely see kind of a stranglehold on the political system with this kind of fighting between the two parties, and we've seen this most closely just about a year and a half ago. We saw another government shutdown because the Democrats and Republicans failed to be able to vote on a budget. This cartoon shows that the 2010 election and the triumphs of the Republicans there kind of overshadowed the 2008 election. So you can see a man's cleaning up from Obama's inauguration, which would have been in January 2009. He's saying already because he sees kind of the triumphant Republican marching through there because they have done so well in the 2010 election. So, we can see politics is very volatile, and you just never know what's going to happen, and you might be triumphantly enjoying, that the Democrats have control of the Congress and the White House, but that can all change very, very quickly. So looking at some current issues, immigration continues to be an issue. I mean, immigration goes back, and talking about it and regulating it and illegal immigration, it goes back to Reagan's presidency, really. And it is something that we've struggled with because we know we have about 10 million undocumented aliens in this country. So Obama in 2012, he issued an executive order that would allow illegal aliens brought in as children to go to school. So these were people who were brought in, kind of by their parents, not really necessarily willfully on their own. It allows them to go to school and college. It was called the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA. Now, this is something he put into place because Congress did not approve what's known as the DREAM Act, which would have provided citizenship for these particular children who came in illegally as children. So the DREAM Act is still something that could be approved in the future, but it has not been currently. So these children are here on the DACA program. They have to basically apply every 2 years to remain in the country. Education continues to be an issue, and we've seen, obviously, there's been an attempt to kind of create one uniform, kind of curriculum and one uniform accountability for the whole country with the core curriculum, and so it's not just in New York State, it's in other states as well. Obviously, we've seen some controversial issues in New York State with that regarding, all of the testing involved, the fact that it was rolled out very, very quickly, and many other various issues regarding that. Social Security will continue to be an issue, again, as the baby boomers retire and as life expectancy continues to increase, and we're paying toward that more and more. Infrastructure continues to be a problem, particularly roads, highways, bridges, things like that. These are going to need to be continuously repaired, and upkeep is going to be needed, and that's a costly thing, especially as our infrastructure ages more and more. Gun control, of course, came to the forefront in the end of Obama's first term, essentially, when the Sandy Hook massacre occurred, which, of course, was the worst school shooting in our nation's history, and I think we're all pretty familiar with that. The cartoon that you're seeing here deals with immigration specifically, so you can see that it says illegal stay out. It represents the wall, and of course I mentioned when I talked about Bush that there were portions built of the wall in various areas along the Mexico and U.S. border. And it says America's attitude toward immigration in a nutshell. So, Uncle Sam's building this wall. He's trying to keep the Mexicans out, but then he's saying under his breath, I'll pay you cash if you help me to build this barrier. And this represents a real problem because there are some people, particularly in the border states, who have become dependent on the labor of illegal immigrants because they work for so cheaply, and you can pay them under the table, and it's, so it's that type of situation where many people are saying we don't want these illegal immigrants, but many people are depending on their labor as well. So I talked about the beginnings of the Iraq War when I talked about Bush, but let me just give you some updates. In December 2011, Obama declared Operation Iraqi Freedom is over, and the Iraqi people now have lead responsibility for the security of their country. So basically, this was the end of combat troops in Iraq, but we have troops still there helping to train the security forces, to train the Iraqi army themselves. So here are some statistics as of 2013, which is the most recent information I was able to obtain. 4,500 U.S. soldiers were killed, over 30,000 seriously wounded. That does not include soldiers who have been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. $490 billion in war benefits are owed to war veterans as well. Civilian deaths we estimate at over 130,000, and there are some organizations that estimate it at far higher than that. So these are Iraqi civilians killed during the war as well. And money-wise, we spent about $1.7 trillion just on the Iraq war. Now, in June 2015, just last week, Obama approved more security forces to Iraq to help the Iraqis in their fight, particularly against ISIS, which has become a great threat in Iraq and Syria. So we're sending about 450 troops over there to help train the Iraqi soldiers. So this is definitely, it's a troubling situation. The Bush administration never really had an exit strategy or plan how to get out of this war, and so it's been a very difficult process to do so, and now we're actually seeing even more troops being sent back to Iraq. So it's a concern about what will happen here in the future. This is your second last slide of the year, ladies. Pretty exciting, right? So I'm going to talk about Afghanistan, the war on terror. Of course, we talked about the beginnings of this after 9/11. This is, again, an update on what's currently going on. So the Taliban, that group that was ruling Afghanistan previous to 9/11, they still control parts of the country, particularly in rural areas of the country. In May of 2012, our president and our NATO allies announced plans to withdraw most forces from Afghanistan by the end of 2014. So that was just about 6 months ago. In January of this year, 2015, 12,000 personnel were remaining to further train and support the Afghan security forces, so to train the Afghani army to continue their fight against the Taliban. In March, Obama announced that he would leave 9,800 troops in Afghanistan because the Afghan president had requested that assistance again to help train the Afghans against the Taliban there. In May, Taliban representatives and Afghan officials held informal peace talks in Qatar. Qatar is another country in the Middle East. Both sides agreed to continue the talks at a later date, but they didn't really come to any firm agreements. However, the Taliban does insist that they will not stop fighting until all foreign troops leave the country. So they will continue to fight until the Americans leave. But the concern is if all the Americans leave, the Afghan army itself is not ready to fight against the Taliban, and the Taliban could regain control of the country. So this is a continuing problem, again, something we need to continue monitoring. At this point, this has been America's longest war, the war that we have been engaged in the longest in our nation's history. And as they said at the end of every Looney Tunes cartoon, that's all, folks. Now, here's your extra credit opportunity. If you can identify the cartoon character that you see pictured there on the bottom right, and you're one of the first 5 people to email me, you will get extra credit. Now, I will say if you've already gotten extra credit twice, you will not be eligible, so we can give somebody else a chance. I also want to say good luck on the exam. It's been a good year. I'm very excited to see what your exam results are because I know you can all do it. So good luck. Have a great summer. Come and visit me in room 106 next year.